It was raining in the city of New York, a hard rain that washed away the mud and sludge. I was sat in my office drinking a bourbon I hadn't had a case in weeks, and I was beginning to get behind on my rent. As I sat there, a dame walked in, a tall blonde wearing a fur coat and a tight long dress. Looked like a rich broad, the kind who lived on Elk Road. She sat down and I looked up from my bourbon. She sat there, she took a delicate white lace handkerchief from her bag and dried her eyes. Then she spoke. "I think someone is trying to kill me, Mr. Silver." I just took another swig of my drink and said, "Any idea who and why?" She wiped her eyes again and said, "Maybe my husband or his lover. I don't know. That's why I want to hire you." I said, "My usual fees plus expenses, though." She nodded and handed me a crisp $100 bill. "Here is the C-note in advance, Mr. Silver." And she stood up and walked out, leaving her details with my secretary. So I was finally on a case, but where to start? I headed down to my local gin joint. So I sat there, I decided to order a scotch on the rocks and think about this new case. A dame in trouble, like I hadn't had to handle them before. Seemed every rich broad wanted me to stop them from being killed. After a quick drink, I walked out into the night. I found her address easily and sat down nearby. I watched the house. It seemed quiet enough, maybe too quiet. Was this all a wild goose chase, or was it serious? So I sat there, getting wetter and wetter in my long brown coat. I remembered the last case like this, and how it had ended badly, very badly. I'd taken a bullet to the shoulder and had to spend weeks in hospital. I didn't intend to be that foolish again. However, I was woken from my thoughts when a loud earpiece and scream came from the house. I rushed in only to find the dame dead, a knife sticking out her chest. So I looked around. I couldn't see anyone. Whoever it was had left the scene fast. I called it in, but something told me the police wouldn't be able to find their heads with both hands on this one. So I started looking at all the evidence, what little there was. A strange paw print caught my attention, like a panther's paw, but it couldn't be. There was just a single print, and that on the fine wooden floor. I sketched it. The police soon took the body, and you can guess who they turned to for answers. I spent 2 hours telling them what I was doing there, but eventually they got the message. I was let go for now, but something had me worried. I'd seen that single print before, in the case where I got shot. But what connection did these two dames have to each other? I took a slug chasing down that dame's killer and never caught him. Was he back? Was the Panther killer back? If so, how and why? I was quick to get back on the case, but there was something disturbing about that paw print. It seemed odd, out of place. What was he doing there? If it was him, and why leave a single print? I had never understood that. Was it his calling card, or did he just like confusing the cops? I moved through the streets and headed back to my office. I took a bottle from the drawer and also a case file. I sat reading the file while drinking my bourbon. I had got so close to the Panther killer, and he had slipped away from me, leaving me with a slug in my shoulder. What did I miss, and why was he back now? I sat there pondering this, running it through my mind, but I drew a blank. I had got close, so close, but there was nothing here that I'd missed. He was so careful, left no clues except that one print. I decided to call it a night. I headed home. Next morning I headed out into the streets. Decided to ask our neighbors if they'd seen anything, but it drew a blank. We saw nothing, but that wasn't a surprise. The rich never see anything, at least not when the cops come calling. So I moved on. I checked the house again, but still found nothing. The print was still there, of course, but nothing else. It seemed like a dead end till I saw something. A small business card for one of those upbeat joints. The theater on Broad Street. It wasn't that it seemed out of place. A rich dame like this would be bound to go to a place like this. It was the notes scribbled on the business card. Seat A3, 7:30 p.m. Saturday. That was today, at least the date that was below it was. I decided to keep the appointment, see what happened. Putting on my best suit, I went and sat in the seat. at the right time. So I sat there, a boring play started, very posh and boring stuff. Beside me sat a tall man with a scar on his left cheek. Could this be the man? I didn't know for sure, so I waited. He looked at me, and back at the stage. He didn't seem surprised to see me there. He just moved uneasily in his seat. I noticed this, but said nothing. I wasn't ready to make my move. I sat through the whole play and tried not to go to sleep from boredom. He looked at me and whispered, "Is the play keeping you awake, Silver?" I became wide awake. Oh, it was him. I knew his voice. I'd heard it as I was passing out 6 months ago. I just shook my head and whispered, "Didn't sleep last night." He smiled. "That shoulder giving you pain again?" I couldn't believe my ears. He was taunting me because he knew I didn't have a thing on him, except that print, and he could deny the print was anything to do with him and I wouldn't have a case. I made a mental note of his face and hoped of catching him in the act, and left. The Panther killer. I was sat next to him, but I couldn't arrest him. I felt annoyed, to say the least. I decided to call in a favor from a buddy at the station. I headed over that way, walking slowly, thinking about the problem, hoping he would slip up somewhere. As I entered the station, I saw my buddy sat at a desk eating a donut. I walked over and asked for my favor, a name to the description. He looked at me and said, "Sure, wait here while I check our records." He got up and went to the records department and came back with a name. "His name is Tony Pantera." I said, "I see. Well, thanks. That's more than I got last time. Last time all I got was a vague look. Thanks, pal." I walked out. Tony Pantera. So that was who he was. But that still didn't explain how I would catch him or where to find him. I needed something I could use against him. Something linking this clown to the murders. I decided to call it a night and went back to my office. I sat there drinking a bourbon, thinking the problem out, planning my next move. But unknown to me, Tony was planning his too. But just as I was going to switch the lights off and call it a day, one of his stooges walked in, waving a gun around and warning me to back off, or the Panther would claw me too. And as a proof that he meant it, the stooge shot my glass and said next time his aim would be better. After he left, I sat down and cleaned up the glass. Fortunately, I had finished the drink. I was close, I could feel it, I must have been, or else why would goons be warning me off? I recovered the slug from the wall and looked at it. Nothing special, at least not that I could tell. Just a 9mm, same as always, same as the one I had pulled from my shoulder. But what did that tell me? I knew who the message was from. I knew as soon as he walked in. Once I had done cleaning up, I went to my local gin joint again. I needed a drink and my glass was broken. I ordered a bourbon neat, no ice. I sat drinking it slowly and looking around carefully. I was sure I was close, but I needed something. The final piece to the puzzle. What could it be? As I walked home, I could feel the air icy and I could swear I was being followed. I turned around. No one was on the street. I guess it was my imagination, so I walked on. When I got home, I sat down and fell asleep in my chair. I was awoken next morning to a call from the station. Apparently, my buddy had done some police work for a change. He told me Tony would be at a bar on 5th Street at noon, if I wanted him. I smiled. "Thanks, Pally. I will be there." Threatening me was a mistake he won't repeat. Sure enough, I was there, a posher joint than I was used to, but that was no surprise. Sure enough, at noon, Tony walks in and acts like he owned the joint, which he probably did. As he sat at the bar, I smiled and said, "So, Tony, what brings you here? You following me, or just making sure your goons don't miss me this time?" He turned a look of anger in his eyes. "Mr. Silver, it is you who is following me, and if you don't leave, well, let's just say accidents happen. We wouldn't want you to hurt that shoulder of yours again, would we?" I thought about hitting him, but played it cool and said, "You don't think I've come alone, do you?" and pointed to my buddy who I had called and told to join me. He smiled. "So you have company," and whispered, "You got nothing on me." I said nothing, just stood up. He thought I had nothing on him, but I had an ace up my sleeve, and now I played it. "You sent a goon to shoot me, but maybe next time." You shouldn't give him your gun. We can match it to yours, and we will. He stood up and tried to punch me, but I caught his arm and had him on the ground quickly. I then cuffed him and handed him over to be charged. It was 2 days later I heard that he'd been charged with the murders, but something told me he would never stick. But for now anyway, he was where he belonged, behind bars. I guess I was wrong though, because Tony Pantera died in prison, poisoned, probably by his mafia boss. As I heard it, I sat back and relaxed in my office, listening to the rain on my window, waiting for the case where I would actually get paid.